Have you ever been in the midst of a conversation with your husband that out of nowhere turns into a huge fight, leaving you wondering what just happened? Or alternately, maybe it wasn't a one-time kind of thing that happened, but you just noticed like, man, he has not been very loving lately, or he's accusing you of not being very respectful or rude. And you're like, how? Like, what am I doing? What are you doing? Where is the disconnect here? Because something is just not meeting up. If so, you're going to love today's conversation, and I am so excited to bring it to you. In today's conversation, I'm speaking with Emerson Eggerichs, author of the New York Times best-selling book you've probably heard of, Love and Respect. It's sold over 2 million copies, which is a huge deal for a book. And for me personally, it's one of the few books that I have read more than once. I've read through this thing at least 2 or 3 times because it's so helpful. Before we dive into our conversation, though, I do want to give a bit of a disclaimer. If you do a little bit of Googling, you will find that his work has been criticized by some as enabling abuse. Now, if you read through the book, as I have multiple times, that is not his intent as I have understood it at all. And we even talk a little bit about that today. That's kind of similar in my mind. This is a poor analogy, but just because a portion of people have problems with Christianity or the church doesn't mean that Christianity as a whole is wrong or bad. It means it has been misused in some ways to further harm to some people. And that's kind of the same thing that's going on here. This is not meant at all to say that you should stay in an abusive or harmful marriage or that you should endure mistreatment or abuse in the slightest. I want to be very clear that if you are in a difficult, abusive relationship, or even if you're not sure if you are, go speak to a counselor, speak to a pastor, and get some clarity on that. This conversation really is meant exclusively for those who say, hey, I'm in a pretty good marriage, or I'm in an average marriage that could be better. For me, being in that situation of, okay, I'm in a good marriage, it has been so tremendously helpful for me to read through these books and to apply them to my marriage. But I am somebody with very goodwill towards my spouse, and my spouse has very goodwill towards me. So when you have that foundation, these books are tremendously helpful. But if you are someone who is saying, I don't know that my spouse actually loves me and has goodwill towards me, I want to put that out there because I think that's really an important distinction. So all of that being said, if you are someone who's like, hey, I want to understand my spouse better, I want to respect him more, I want to love him more, and I want those same things for me in return, Emerson's books and our conversations today are really going to help you see some things that you might have been missing, whether that is helping your spouse to learn to love you better or you learning to be more respectful of your spouse, just in all the things that we do that we don't even realize how we're coming across, and it happens so often, or just the little light bulb moments that we don't always realize until someone points it out to us, and then we're like, oh, that makes so much sense. So if you are someone who's saying, hey, like I feel like I'm missing something, like we're getting in fights, we're not getting along, I don't know why he's not loving me properly, I don't know why he keeps saying I'm disrespectful, I'm not doing anything, where's the disconnect? If that describes your marriage today, then I really hope you'll listen in to this really enlightening conversation. Emerson, it is so great to get to have you on the podcast today. I know this is going to be such a great conversation I'm really excited for. So thank you for being here.
Thank you.
As you have talked with couples over the years, are there any big trends that you've noticed? What have you seen pop up again and again?
Well, Sarah and I have been married since 1973, before you were a thought in the mind of God. So yes, we've lived 5 decades as husband and wife, and I think we've personally experienced many things. We both come out of families that, the upbringing there was not healthy. There were over, 20 divorces in her extended family. My mom and dad divorced each other, but then they remarried each other. They didn't know the Lord, but mom was a single parent for 5 years. So I think Sarah and I have been very thoughtful about what makes for a healthy relationship and what are the ingredients that can result in lack of health in that regard. And I think I have my PhD in family studies, and so research has always been very, very exciting to me. And the University of Washington studied 2,000 couples for 20 years, Brittany, and they said we now know the 2 key ingredients for successful marriages: love and respect. And these were couples in their love laboratory. They were being videotaped. They had linguists there. They were monitored for heartbeats per minute. I mean, it was an in-depth thing. Dr. John Gottman, he actually wrote a book, Why Marriages Succeed or Fail. And he takes the position that love and respect, has been really the foundation. And in other words, the opposite. If I'm coming across to Sarah in an unloving, hostile way, it's going to deflate her. And if she comes across to me in a contemptuous, disrespectful way, and most men do not doubt a woman's love. It's very rarely where a guy says, you're coming across to me in an unloving way. He'll use the phrase, you're coming across to me disrespectfully. Though I think she will say that quite often. She'll say, how can you talk to me so unlovingly and say that you love me? It doesn't make sense to me. But these two key ingredients. So if, in answer to the question, even though the technology is changing, even though so many things are different than they were in the 1800s, the human heart remains the same. And I know that the message we've been espousing is, hey, what does it mean for me as a husband to sound loving to my wife? And what does it mean for me as a wife to sound respectful to my husband when he's not respectable in the moment? Many people think, you've got to respect evil, respect what isn't respectable. You've got to respect what's unlovable. No, you respectfully confront it, just as a husband is to lovingly confront that. It's never easy because it's not our default reaction. But what we've learned in answer to the question is love and respect is vital. And here's why. We saw this in Ephesians 5:33 as well. Husbands, love your wives, and wives, respect your husbands. And there was no debate on the first part of husbands loving. But the idea of respecting a man strikes women, and you're feeding his ego, that you're saying he's superior. You've got to give him license to do what he wants to do. He's going to treat you like a doormat. He's going to emotionally abuse you. You're going to set the feminist team back 50 years. There's a mantra of responses, and women are never mean-spirited. There really is an undercurrent of fear that they're ultimately going to be mistreated. But the question is whether or not the Lord has revealed something here that really empowers the woman. Certainly 1 Peter 3 verses 1 and 2, you win a disobedient husband through respectful behavior, Peter says. So there must be a power here. But what I discovered in the Ephesians 5:33 passage, and by the way, women need RESPECT, in 1 Peter 3, he goes on to talk to husbands about living with your wives in an honorable way. Peter never addresses love. He says, wives respect, husbands honor. It was all about honor and respect. So we both need respect in a huge way. And in fact, the University of Washington believes that contempt is probably the greatest toxic element in all of marriages. But what I discovered from Ephesians 5:33, and then I'll go quiet here, here's the connection. Without love, she reacts without respect. And without respect, he reacts without love. And this thing gets crazy, it keeps spinning. And we've asked 7,000 people this question. When you're in a conflict with your spouse, are you more likely to feel unloved or more likely to feel disrespected? And Brittany, 83% of the men say they feel disrespected during those moments. 72% of the women say they feel unloved. It's not 100% on either side. So what we say is, hey, if the felt need is in keeping with what I'm saying, then my prediction is, apart from technology, apart from the century you're living in, if you start getting on the crazy cycle, this will probably be the most detrimental thing long term. And you've got to learn how to recognize you're on it, and you've got to be able to learn how to jump off of it quickly. Because without love, she reacts without respect, and without respect, he reacts without love. It's going to be a negative loop. And then we're going to get really discouraged because we're thinking we've got major marital problems when really we don't.
Yeah, and there's so much that I could unpack from there. I'm trying to remember, okay, these are the things that I want to ask you next so that I don't forget them. But there's two things. The first is that I love that you kind of alluded to respect doesn't mean that we are agreeing with evil. I think that when we hear, oh, we're supposed to love, we're supposed to respect, that is really easy to go in one ear and out the other. And to say, well, of course we know that we should love, and of course we know we should respect. But then actually playing that out isn't that simple. I know for me as a young wife, I knew I was supposed to respect my husband, but I didn't always know, what does that look like? And that's why your book was one of the most helpful books that I had read during that time. And one of the few that I have read multiple times. I'm even rereading it again, just remember. And I'm no, I need to reread this again because I know this. I've read this book a couple times. But when we don't see it modeled in our own home or in other homes, or even the fact if we did see it modeled, every individual is so unique that what my parents might have, the way they might show respect may be totally different than the way that my husband wants me to show him respect. And you mentioned the crazy cycle. Like I had absolutely seen that. And I mean, still, because we're human, things happen. Still see that in my mirrors sometimes where I will say something and it's like we get in the cycle and I'm like, no, like where did we go off here? Like, how did this happen? We took a misstep someplace. So being able to recognize that and to figure out, okay, how are we getting in these cycles? How do we get out of them is so helpful. But my question for you is, okay, you said love and respect. Can you kind of flesh out those definitions a little bit more? Because I feel like there's so many of us who are going to have misconceptions, and you started to allude to some of them. But if you can kind of flesh out, what do you mean by love your wife? What do you mean by respect your husband? And what do you not mean by those terms?
No, good question. In fact, that's the main substance of the book, Love and Respect. It's been out since 2004, and we're very grateful. It just continues to serve couples. And I define what love is to a wife. And I say, any man that's listening, I put an acronym. And I studied the Bible 30 hours a week for nearly 20 years as a senior pastor at Trinity Church in East Lansing, Michigan, a college town, Michigan State University. So they wanted me to study. And I went through every verse in the Old and New Testament to husbands and wives that now applies to the Christ follower post-resurrection. Because not everything in the Old Testament under the nation of Israel applies to the church. And so you have to rightly divide the word of truth. So then I came up with those salient passages to husbands, for instance, and I put it in an acronym, and I worked hard at this because it's a teaching tool. Couple, COUPLE. And if a husband says, what does it really mean to be loving? Well, first of all, it's your demeanor. It's your tone. Hone the tone, as I say. If you just even ask her, how do I say this in a loving way? You know, my old man, you know his issues. How do I say this lovingly? Because I keep stepping on your air hose. That in and of itself is loving to a woman. I mean, that's just a beautiful thing to say. But COUPLE is, am I close to her? Am I open with her? Am I understanding her? Am I at peace with her? Am I loyal to her? And am I esteeming her? That's the honor, respect. Respect and honor of a woman is part and parcel of love. So I say to a man, if she's saying, I don't feel close to you, I don't feel you're open with me, I don't feel you understand me, I don't feel we're at peace with each other, I don't feel you're loyal to me, I don't feel that you esteem me, she's not going to feel loved. And so I challenged them in at our conference. We've been doing these love and respect events for, over 20 years now, a 2-day event. We average about 1,800. And 49% of those who initiate coming to the conference is the male. He's not indifferent to marriage at all. He just doesn't understand. And we can maybe even talk about that a little bit today. But the interest in the man is certainly there, and he wants to know what it is he's supposed to do. And so I say, if you have that loving demeanor, you just guard against sounding angry and harsh, and just use that as a checklist, you're going to be married to one happy woman. Does that make sense, Brittany?
Yeah, absolutely. Now I'm waiting for the wife's side because I'm like, yes, all of those sound wonderful. Please, all of those. But also, I want to know, like, what can I be doing? I think so often we get into arguments, and obviously every person is different. So we don't want to make the overgeneralization that all women are one way and all men are another way. But as you've said in your research, there's very consistent trends. So what are the things that women generally tend to do, or that men want them to do from their wives? Basically, what's the acronym for women?
Well, I think the first thing is most women don't intend to be disrespectful.
Yeah.
And so she sees her husband reacting. It's kind of like, what did I say? And it becomes a real sorrowful situation for her because her heart's in the right place. Women can't not care. They just care. It's within their nature to nurture. They love to love, and she sees her as helping him. Isn't she a helper suitable? So her mindset isn't, I don't get up early in the morning to storyboard ways to show him disrespect. At 10:15, I'm going to call him and tell him I don't respect him. That's never her mindset. It just isn't. She wants to connect. She wants them to be happy. She wants to be feeling that we're a team, that we care for each other, that he has her on his heart. So the first thing a woman has to ask herself is, am I coming across in a way that's disrespectful that I don't see? The University of Washington said women don't see their gestures of contempt. When she's upset, the hand on the hip, the scolding finger, the sigh, the rolling of the eyes actually darken, the face turns sour, and the head goes back. And when she's really upset, when estrogen kicks in, the word choice of disrespect just flows. It just, she doesn't have to try to even think about it. And so all of that is coming from her heart to say to him, you've hurt me. I'm frustrated right now. We need to talk about this. I need you to look at me and say, I'm sorry. Will you forgive me? And instead, he just shuts down. And so now she's completely confused, just has no idea. She's tried everything she knows to do. And she's not trying to be disrespectful when he has the audacity to say, you're being disrespectful. Nobody talks to me this way, but I'm never good enough for you. I'm a complete failure. Nice. And she's in, what planet are you on? So one of the things that every wife has to realize is that there's an innocence that she brings to these conflicts, but she doesn't see sometimes what she's doing to sabotage the very thing that she's longing to do. And she also feels that he needs to deserve the respect. If she starts landing on the cultural mindset, he hasn't earned it, he doesn't deserve it, as though somehow now her disgust and disdain and contempt is justifiable. And as I said earlier, contempt is the number one toxic element. And I think some researchers would point out that women have no idea that they are the toxic element, but because they see themselves as loving and caring, they don't see it. They're deceived on that front. So they have to step back at a moment and realize my heart's in the right place. I'm trying to connect with him because I care. At the worst, I see this as a minor criticism. I feel he needs to grow up and change. So the first thing that I think such a lady needs to do is just simply say, hey, how do I say this in such a way that you don't feel I'm trying to diss you? I'm not trying to dishonor you. You would die for me, and I believe that if I don't kill you first. I know that, but I'm so mad right now. You don't like me, I don't like you. But how do I get a conversation going here without you thinking I'm using this as another opportunity to send you a message that you're not good enough? Coach me here. Sometimes you need to have a conversation about how to have these conversations, and don't be afraid of that. Some women think, well, we shouldn't have to do that. Yes, you do have to do that because you're misrepresenting yourself and he's misinterpreting you, and you need to help him change his view of you. And if you say, well, he ought not to see me that way, then you need to consult the research, because the research would point out you probably are misrepresenting yourself, albeit motivated well. So the thing that I tell women to do is, first of all, just step back and take a moment, and don't be afraid to use a few different vocabulary words like, hey, how do I say this in such a way that you don't think I'm trying to diss you right now? That's so disarming that a lot of men will stop immediately and may even grin. And if he's suspicious, you've been reading another marriage book?
Mm-hmm.
And I know you don't drink, because otherwise I conclude you're drunk. But he will actually look at her, which is what she wants. She wants to be seen. He'll look at her, his spirit will soften, and he will connect. The very longing of her heart to be seen, to be understood, for his spirit to be soft, to invite him toward her, that sense of connection will all happen if she simply were to ask, how do I say this without coming across in a way that makes you feel disrespected? You don't lose power, you gain it. Make sense?
Absolutely. And that's definitely something that I have learned over my course of my marriage so far is like, it's one thing to love and respect each other, but marriage is built on a lot of skills. Like you need a skill of communication. And that's something that you have to learn. Even if you absolutely adore that person, like it is a skill to be able to communicate. The next thing I want to ask you though is expectations, because that is a big one that can get us in a lot of trouble, especially because we don't always know what our expectations are ahead of time. I give this example. I give lots of examples to my children about, someday you're going to grow up, you will have a husband or wife, and they will come from a different family. Our family, it has been drilled into you for the last however many years, like you do this thing, like don't behave this way, behave this way. They're going to come from a whole different family. They're going to have this whole different set of expectations. And so I'm just envisioning this marriage where a husband and wife come in. There's actually a joke. I don't know if you've heard, it's pretty common, I think. Where a husband and wife go to counseling separate, and they talk to the counselor separately, and he asks them, well, how often are you having sex in a week? And she's like, oh my goodness, all the time, 3 times a week. And he says, oh my goodness, hardly ever, only 3 times a week. So that just to say, like, you could be on the same page and have totally different expectations, but we don't know what our expectations are until they're violated. Then we have to backtrack. And so often we learn things the hard way when we do the wrong thing. So all of that to say, how can we know what our expectations are before we find out the hard way because we've gotten in an argument? Is that possible? And how do we know if our expectations are normal or usual? Maybe he's saying, oh, well, everyone gets mad. Like, I should have the right to get upset and to yell. And she's like, I can't deal with this yelling. Like, I have an expectation you would never yell. And somehow there has to be a balance that may be different for every couple, but there has to be a balance somewhere.
I mean, I think that was well said, and I think you've given great illustrations. I think the first thing is no one person can, meet all of your needs. I mean, we have to recognize that if your spouse's failure to meet expectations, causes more discontentment than your love for Christ, then maybe those expectations could be pushing into a lack of realism. And I think that's why sometimes sitting down with a godly, wise person, couple in the church, been married a long time, and just talk it through, because those expectations can be realistic, but they may not be. And we need to kind of recalibrate a little bit. But realistic expectations align with understanding some of what we're talking about, the pink and blue perspectives. And it's fascinating that they become clear often if I just get in tune, if I just kind of reflect a little bit and I'm honest with myself. Some of us are saying honest to God, and we've never been honest to before the Lord. But if we are just take a moment and really begin to think about it, I think we become a little bit more self-aware, and we can begin to discern this. But let's take a look at some of these. Even though, a wife says, even though I had an emotional meltdown when he failed again to do what I asked him to do, he should immediately apologize and change, since he caused my frustration. Okay, now there's a huge nugget of truth in that. But I mean, there could be some unrealistic expectations there. One, she's overlooking her emotional meltdown, and because he should just know, right? Or she might say he should know where I want to eat out or what I need from him when I'm upset without me having to tell him, since I do that toward him. Read the mind issue. Is that a realistic thing or unrealistic? She wants to be reassured that he's thinking about her. I get the motivation. But look at your sons. I mean, if your daughter-in-law was doing that toward your baby boy all the time, I mean, he's not tracking always. He's not a bad kid. He's just on a different wavelength. Or she might say, he should want to talk to me and connect emotionally on a daily basis. And because he doesn't, I expect him to be in counseling to learn more how to be more emotive, like us women who are the normal ones. Or a husband, he might say, she should know that I love her because I provide for her and I'm home every night. Or just because I get angry and I'm harsh, she shouldn't take this so personally and then want to talk about it and tell me again that I hurt her feelings. She needs to get a thicker skin, right? Or she should want sex as much as I do, and because she doesn't, there is something wrong with her. Okay. So now this is where, when we hear these things, we kind of immediately sense, yeah, you know what? I think these individuals are pushing their expectations too far. And I think if we sit down with somebody, we can talk that through. But that doesn't mean that we let go of the expectations. On the other hand, there are legitimate needs. The question is this: how do I communicate my need to my spouse in such a way that I don't deprive them of their needs? So, for instance, if a wife needs to feel loved, right? That's a deep need. I need you to be more loving toward me, but she sends the message disrespectfully. She's disrespectful. What she's doing then is depriving him of his need to feel respected for who he is apart from his performance, and her attempt to motivate him to meet her need. Or a man who says, nobody can love that woman. I'm going to teach her a lesson. I'm not going to love her until she starts respecting me. So you deprive her of her deepest need to motivate her to meet yours. It just doesn't work that way. We cannot use unholy means to motivate them to meet those deep-needed situations that are legitimate expectations. And again, that's an art, a skill that you were referencing earlier, but we can learn it. And many couples think they're miles apart because they've been through this crazy cycle. They think, but I wrote the book. These are light bulb moments where people would come to us, hundreds of testimonies of people saying, we thought we were miles apart, continents apart, and then we got a little insight, and we just pivoted. And it was kind of like, unbelievable. I mean, light bulb moment, aha moment, eureka moment. When Sarah and I'd have our book signing, people say, why didn't anybody tell us this 30 years ago? And so one of the things I try to encourage people with is, even as we're talking about some of these things that could discourage us, oh, brother, in the few minutes I now realize I'm a complete failure. No, you're not. And Proverbs 24:16 says, a righteous man falls 7 times, but arises again. And as Brittany was saying, there is this little skill, just a little insight, not the least of which is learning to reframe some of this and decode. And it is amazing how quickly some of this can, turn the corner. But in this topic of unrealistic expectations, I kind of got to be honest with myself about some of this. And otherwise, I'm just going to set the relationship up for tension.
Yeah. And I love that you mentioned the light bulb moments, because that is a perfect transition into what I wanted to ask you next. Over all of the years, decades of talking with all of these couples, you have identified in your book some of these light bulb moments, things that before you know them, and then you know them, and you're like, man, that puts everything to so much perspective. I wish I had known that earlier. So can you walk us through, it doesn't have to be all of them, but a few of these light bulb moments?
Yes, well, there are 12 in the book, and we center on 3 dimensions: the upward, our faith, and there are 4 chapters dealing with that. And then we deal with the interpersonal, the skills we need in relationship to a spouse. There are 4 chapters there. And then it concludes with this idea of personal wisdom, the emotional intelligence, some of that knowledge and skill that you referenced. And so I'm very excited about this, because these are the testimonies of people who have said, it really did change us almost over. And it's like they were blown away. And sometimes it feels like maybe this is too easy. It's pixie dust that we're selling. But these insights can, in fact, flip a relationship quite quickly. For instance, not wrong, just different shades of right is one of those principles. And the reason this is important is that we get into conflicts with our spouse. Sarah and I get in conflict. And if I know I'm right, Brittany, then Sarah has to be what?
Has to be wrong.
Has to be wrong. But let's just stop for a moment. I mean, unless there's some moral issue here that she's violating the law or she's doing something unbiblical, then there is in culinary philosophy this axiom: there is no disputing taste. In culinary philosophy, there's no disputing taste. You can't say that because I don't want salt on my food that I'm wrong. I'm not wrong. And so the challenge for us, and this is the problem with the English language, we don't have ways of saying your position is less better. But Sarah and I've tried to introduce it. Honey, you're not wrong on this. I think my way is better, but that would at worst make yours less better. We're both looking for the greater good, the better way, the best option. And neither one of us are wrong. We're just looking at this through different shades of right. And I believe God's using this so that we'll brainstorm to find a win-win result that may even make each of us happier than if we got our own way. But see, people don't have a framework for that. And part of the framework we've been giving people is how to introduce this clunky language. I just think your way is less better. I don't see you as wrong. We're on the same team. We're just, we have the same goal. We're just want to run different plays here. Let's just say he's got the gift of exhortation from God. She's got the gift of mercy. Well, the implication of that in parenting is she's going to want to show mercy to the kids, and he's going to want to, correct them. And there's going to be a tension there. Now, is she wrong for being too merciful? He wants to tell her she is. And is he wrong for being an exhorter? She wants to tell him. But this is God's gift to them to do what? To be able to come together as husband and wife and kind of sharpen each other and come up with maybe a third option, or it's called the creative alternative, that really makes it even better. But in the process, we start pointing fingers, yelling at each other. And why? We both want what's best for the kids. We're just coming at this through our hard wiring, our upbringing, our temperament. One's an extrovert, one's a introvert. We have different gifts. And then we wonder why we don't get along. But instead, we need to step back and realize, wait a minute, unless I can say, thus saith the Lord, you're wrong, then we need to temper this a little bit. Why? Because it's going to result in an even better decision if I'm not selfish. Now, if I just want what I want when I want it, and I don't care about you, then you've got a serious issue. But most people have goodwill. Paul said in 1 Corinthians 7:33 and 34, the husband is concerned about how to please his wife, and the wife is concerned about how to please her husband. And my campaign has been to serve people who say, yeah, we have basic goodwill. We don't have good follow-through always, and we don't always like each other, but we have basic goodwill. There isn't evil intent here. Given that's the case, then good things will always result from those clashing preferences, given that we frame it in the standpoint of refraining from judgmental statements and weaponizing our position against the other individual. Does that make sense, Brittany?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a really important distinction to make. If both parties have goodwill, then it's okay if you have different opinions on things. Like you said a minute ago, we both want what is best for our marriage. We both want what is best for our family and for our children. And as long as you have that I won't say is the foundation because God is the foundation, but like, down there somewhere as one of those earlier layers, hey, we are both on the same team here. We are both looking for the same good. Then it's okay if we have different opinions and we can find that third option. Like, what's the other thing that gets both of our needs met, that takes both of our preferences and opinions into account? And I tell this to my husband all the time as well, that, he and I are wired differently in some ways, and that's great. And I tell him, like, that is a good thing. I love that we are different in these ways because there are some things that he's better at and there's some things that I'm better at, and we both have our different perspectives, and when we bring them together we can get the best of both instead of having to fight over his way or my way. And that works really great for us as long as we can remember it. But let me ask you, what would you say then to someone who's listening to this who says, I know that I have such goodwill towards my spouse. I really care so much about our marriage. I want things to be great, but I genuinely don't know if my spouse has goodwill towards me. How does a woman kind of recognize? Because sometimes you could be in a terrible relationship and not really know, like, is this normal? Is this what everyone deals with? Or is this actually a really bad relationship? How can she realize, okay, we both have goodwill, we just need to work on this? Or, there's something really going on here that maybe this wouldn't be the right course of action.
Well, Jesus, Moses, and Paul said, let every fact be confirmed by 2 or 3 witnesses. And even in 1 Corinthians 6, if there's a conflict, is there not a wise person among you to settle these disputes? So if there's an accusation that the individual is abusive, are we talking about physical abuse? There's a fact there. My mother, I witnessed my dad attempt to strangle my mother when I was 2.5, and then she left for 5 years with my sister and me, and they were not Christ followers. So we always have this response, well, what about abuse? And what if my spouse doesn't have goodwill? I said, there are 10,000 shelters out there. There are experts all across the country. If there is huge abuse going on, then the facts should be there and that accusation needs to be brought. That could be a legal issue, and people need to take that into consideration and never put yourself in harm's way. One of the challenges is that people are hijacking that word abuse and claiming the other person's abusive because they're not operating in the marriage the way that I am. So there was a syndicated radio program. So, Dr. Eggerichs, we wish you were here last week. We did a whole week on silent abuse. And I said, silent abuse? Yes, when the husband chooses not to talk. I said, the research points out from the University of Washington that during conflict, 85% of those who withdraw and stonewall is the husband. And the women were asked, when he does that, what does it feel like? Well, the response was so common, they made a descriptor called active hostility, because she could not imagine shutting down over minor criticism. So in her world, he hates me. He doesn't love me, because she could not imagine shutting down. But they were monitoring the heartbeats per minute, and during that conflict in that love lavatory, his heartbeats were 99 beats per minute. He was stoic in appearance, but he was in warrior mode. This is fight or flight, and he didn't want to fight. So he withdrew to calm down. Every man on the planet understands exactly what I'm talking about. He doesn't know this research. He doesn't be able, I need to calm down. You're picking a fight. And you're picking a fight. I'm not trying to pick a fight. But in his world, that's what would be happening if someone else was talking to him this way. So he's in this warrior mode. 85% of the men withdraw like that. 99 hearts beat. She looks like she's emotionally out of control, but her heartbeats were normal. If the husband were to just simply say, I'm sorry, we forgive you, she immediately softens and goes into, oh, no, I was far worse than you. I should apologize to you. I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have. I was bad. I was really bad. She will be really quick to reconcile because that was her aim in the first place. But here's the deal. It's so easy for those women to conclude he's abusive when, the question on the table is, why is he doing what he's doing? In my world as a man, among men, we are best friends and we get into a heated moment. We're lethal. We're the ones that die for the women. They're not called upon to die for us. We are called to die. And we will do that in a heartbeat given someone's about to harm you. We'll be dead before we even think about it. That physiology, that quickness is there. So we have to learn to control that. So among men, we just say, drop it, forget it, and we exit. Because the relationship with my best buddy is far more important than this stupid issue that we're arguing about. And we're just not going to let this get out of control. So we de-escalate. Then, several hours later, we don't say, hey, we need to talk about our feelings. You hurt my feelings. Never goes down that way. Instead, he'll say, hey, you were going to build that shed on Saturday. You mind if I come over? And I've got a new tool I really want to try. I think it'll save time. It's a staple gun, and I think it'll work really. See, it's a gesture. Is everything okay between us? We don't talk about what happened. The gesture is enough among us as men. I say to women who say, well, he never apologizes. Yeah, but did he do what you are asking him to do this last week? Like fix the faucet under the sink? Yeah, he was underneath there. I said, look for the gesture. I know he should write you a poem. I know he should say he's sorry. I know all those romantic sentiments that you have. God hardwired you that way. But to claim that this man is abusive, when in his world it's an act of honor, and in your world it's an act of hostility, all of us then have to ask ourselves, during this withdrawing and stonewalling, is that an act of hostility or an act of honor? The answer is yes. But the cultures become pink and feminist, so that the female now trumps. And so she goes on social media, and men aren't, because he doesn't throw his wife under the bus. Very few men do that. It's not in keeping with the honor code. But women solicit empathy and support, so she goes out, takes the picture of what happened, and all the women say, divorce the bum. When the fact is, this would be her son, and women are leaving marriages 3-1. Your son won't leave the marriage because he's a good man who loves God, and he's trying to do the honorable thing, and he's now being labeled as unloving because he goes quiet to calm down. So here's one of the things that's so important, why I say people are miles apart, when the fact is they're only inches apart. He's not unsafe. So what you have to do is come up with a plan. And I talk about, what do you do then when she's wanting to connect and talk about this, and he's shutting down and walking away? I tell them what to do. But any man who's listening, there's another side of this, and I want to defend the woman so that we don't feel like we're being biased against gals. The researchers at the University of Washington saw that women were criticizing, complaining in this love laboratory. These linguists said you can't interpret it any other way, even though it's not politically correct. It's anti-feminist, potentially. Women criticize, complain, criticize, complain, criticize, complain. And the men, when they're asked about this, they just see it as another opportunity she's using to send me a message that she has contempt for who I am as a human being, that I'm not good enough, I'm a failure in her eyes, and she's just looking to send me that message. And yet all the research, again, all my academic research, on all the social studies, all the scales, women are nurturers. They're the caregivers. Women care. They can't not care. I say to men, if you've got a cancer that's going to kill you, you'll be on 100 prayer meeting, 100 prayer groups around the country, all of which are women praying for you. They can't get you off their heart. They don't even know you. They can't not care. So I say to men, when she criticizes and complains, is it an act of contempt or is it an act of care? And I say to the men, you're going to have to reinterpret this, because I believe she's a good-willed woman who cares. Now, she's delivering the message in a way that you as a man wouldn't do. We don't go around complaining and criticizing each other. That's why you see in the political apparatus, the more certain parties become feminist in their orientation, it's all about complaint and criticism among both men and women who've gotten into this mindset, criticism, complaint, criticism, complaint. And it's just de-energizing after a while. Let's get on with some proactive situations. But even so, apart from that comment, I challenged the man to reinterpret this. And in the book, Light Bulb Moments, I unpack, well, how do you deal with those moments when I'm feeling this woman is being disrespectful, when the truth is she's seeking reassurance of being loved? Shawnee Feldhans called me one day. She said, Emerson, we did this research on women who, we said to the women, we know you want emotional support when you're upset and you're talking to your husband. And we know that. We know what you need as a woman. But she said, we went even further and we asked the question, do you need your husband's love? And she unpacked this. And then she said, what we found out is that these Christian women felt that they were 3 conversations away from hearing their husbands say to them, I don't love you and I'm leaving you for another person. The fear of being unloved and abandoned was overwhelming. And so I say to men, when she has this moment of negativity, she will now begin to be insecure and she will repair. You'll see her whole countenance shift, and now she'll move toward you, even apologetically, to reconnect, because she lives with this undercurrent of anxiety. So this woman who you think is contemptuous, who's complaining, who's criticizing, it's rooted in her care. She's not trying to think I'm going to be contemptuous here. And she's actually complimenting you, not complaining against you. And she is saying, I have a need that only you can meet. You have a strength that I need. And gentlemen, you need to interpret it through that grid, and it'll change everything when you give her the benefit of the doubt and trust her heart. Brittany, does that make sense?
It absolutely does. I feel like we have just barely scratched the surface on all of the knowledge that you share in your books. And I think it's just so helpful to have those frameworks, those things to think about, because so often we don't know what we don't know, or we just say something and obviously the person's going to take it that way, or we say something and be like, how in the world did you get, like, I didn't say anything. And you just don't know what the other person knows or how they're taking it. So being able to have these frameworks in the first place so that you can realize, oh, I do that. Or, oh, okay, at least I don't do that one. Or, oh, they've been doing this, but this is what they've been thinking, is so helpful as step one. And then to go have those conversations with your spouse, because obviously every person is different. So your book is going to give the general guidelines, but then go custom tailor it for your situation. So that leads us into, if somebody is listening to this and they're like, yeah, this is what I need to go like put some of this into practice. I need to go learn. I need to go do. Where is the best place for them to connect with you online and see all of the great resources that you have to offer?
No, thank you. Loveandrespect.com, loveandrespect.com. And we are very excited about the resources we have there. And of course, the new book, HarperCollins, the publisher, it's out in every outlet known to humanity. You can order it on Amazon or probably be at your house in an hour. But we are very grateful for this and all the testimonies. And again, it's based on the biblical truths that I was expositing through the years, through various ways. And people were reading scriptures like, whoa. And that's why the subtitle is 12 Biblical Perspectives for Successful and Satisfied Couples. It's a very positive thing. And I wanted to inspire you as well as inform you.
I love it. I have started reading it. I didn't get finished it because I was reading your old book and I just got camped out there and I didn't quite. So they were on my phone, like reading the ebooks. But yes, that's on my to-do list, reading through those. So hopefully everybody listening, you'll go pick up your copies as well. And thank you so much for such a very good, just packed with lots of wisdom conversation.
Thank you, Brittany.
All right. I hope you found this conversation as interesting and fascinating as I did. And like I said in our interview, we have only just barely begun to scratch the surface. A lot of our conversation was actually about his book, Love and Respect, because it really lays the foundation. But he has a lot of great content and light bulb moments for marriage as well. So maybe if you've read the first book and you're ready to move on to, it's not even his second one, he's written books in between, but you're ready to move on to his latest one. Or if you haven't even read Love and Respect first, I highly recommend both of them. Again, like I said in the introduction to this, two marriages where both of you are genuinely good-willed people who both care about each other and the sake of the marriage. This doesn't mean you're perfect. It doesn't mean you always get it right by any means. But if you say, hey, I'm generally a good person who wants the good of my spouse, and hey, my spouse, he's generally a good person who wants the good of me and our marriage. We don't always get it right, but we're trying. If you've got that, then absolutely go check out both of these books. I really think there's so much insight and wisdom in here that's going to make you have those light bulb moments where you're like, oh, that's how I was coming across. I wasn't meaning to come across that way at all. Oh, I just need to tweak this thing or not do this thing. This is information as a wife I want to have, and I want to make sure that you have it as well. So go ahead and check out his books if you haven't already. And I hope that this was helpful for you. And if it was, make sure that you go and take the next step and talk about it with your spouse, because it's one thing to get the information yourself, and that is good and that is great and that is helpful, but all of us are unique individuals. So no matter if I say something or another author says something of, oh, women are always this way, or men are always this way, or traditionally this way, or like do this, you need to filter it through what works in your marriage, because every wife is not an exact cookie cutter of each other. So if you say, okay, like I've heard these ideas, does this make sense to you? Is this what you want? Is this what you like? Let's talk about it. So use this as an opening to have these dialogues and figure out together, okay, what are my expectations? Where are they being met? Where are they not being met? Are they realistic? What do I need? And how can I get what I need in a way that also honors what my husband needs? What's that third way? What's that way that's going to get both of us what we need that doesn't come into the clashing his way versus my way? What's the third way? How can we meet each other's needs together and ultimately create this beautiful marriage that is such a blessing to us, to our families, to those around us? And that is what I want for you today through this interview. So go ahead, grab the books, talk to your spouse, and have a great rest of your day. And I will see you next time.